When one looks at our drug laws, indeed, at our vice laws altogether, the only organizing principle that appears to make sense of them is that anything which might radically eclipse prayer or procreative sexuality as a source of pleasure has been outlawed. In particular, any drug, LSD, mescaline, psilocybin, DMT, MDMA, marijuana, etc., to which spiritual or religious significance has been ascribed by its users, has been prohibited. Concerns about the health of our citizens or about their productivity are red herrings in this debate, as the legality of alcohol and cigarettes attests. The fact that people are being prosecuted and imprisoned for using marijuana, while alcohol remains a staple commodity, is surely the reductio ad absurdum of any notion that our drug laws are designed to keep people from harming themselves or others. Alcohol is, by any measure, the more dangerous substance. It has no approved medical use, and its lethal dose is rather easily achieved. Its role in causing automobile accidents is beyond dispute. The manner in which alcohol relieves people of their inhibitions contributes to human violence, personal injury, unplanned pregnancy, and the spread of sexual disease. Alcohol is also well known to be addictive. When consumed in large quantities over many years, it can lead to devastating neurological impairments, to cirrhosis of the liver, and to death. In the United States alone, more than 100,000 people annually die from its use. It is also more toxic to a developing fetus than any other drug of abuse. Indeed, crack babies appear to have been really suffering from fetal alcohol syndrome. None of these charges can be leveled at marijuana. As a drug, marijuana is nearly unique in having several medical applications and no known lethal dosage. While adverse reactions to drugs like aspirin and ibuprofen account for an estimated 7,600 deaths and 76,000 hospitalizations each year in the United States alone, marijuana kills no one. Its role as a gateway drug now seems less plausible than ever, and it was never plausible. In fact, nearly everything human beings do, driving cars, flying planes, hitting golf balls, is more dangerous than smoking marijuana in the privacy of one's own home. Anyone who would seriously attempt to argue that marijuana is worthy of prohibition because of the risk it poses to human beings will find that the powers of the human brain are simply insufficient for the job. And yet, we are so far from the shady groves of reason now that people are still receiving life sentences without the possibility of parole for growing, selling, possessing, or buying what is, in fact, a naturally occurring plant. Cancer patients and paraplegics have been sentenced to decades in prison for marijuana possession. Owners of garden supply stores have received similar sentences because some of their customers were caught growing marijuana. What explains this astonishing wastage of human life and material resources? The only explanation is that our discourse on this subject has never been obliged to function within the bounds of rationality. Under our current laws, it is safe to say, if a drug were invented that posed no risk of physical harm or addiction to its users, but produced a brief feeling of spiritual bliss and epiphany in 100% of those who tried it, this drug would be illegal, and people would be punished mercilessly for its use. Only anxiety about the biblical crime of idolatry would appear to make sense of this retributive impulse. Because we are a people of faith, taught to concern ourselves with the sinfulness of our neighbors, we have grown tolerant of irrational uses of state power. Our prohibition of certain substances has led thousands of otherwise productive and law-abiding men and women to be locked away for decades at a stretch, sometimes for life. Their children have become wards of the state. As if such cascading horror were not disturbing enough, violent criminals, murderers, rapists, and child molesters, are regularly paroled to make room for them. Here we appear to have overstepped the banality of evil and plunged to the absurdity at its depths. The consequences of our irrationality on this front are so egregious that they bear closer examination. Each year, over 1.5 million men and women are arrested in the United States because of our drug laws. At this moment, somewhere on the order of 400,000 men and women languish in U.S. prisons for non-violent drug offenses. 1 million others are currently on probation. More people are imprisoned for non-violent drug offenses in the United States than are incarcerated for any reason in all of Western Europe, which has a larger population. The cost of these efforts at the federal level alone is nearly $20 billion annually. The total cost of our drug laws, when one factors in the expense to state and local governments and the tax revenue lost by our failure to regulate the sale of drugs, could easily be in excess of $100 billion each year. Our war on drugs consumes an estimated 50% of the trial time of our courts and the full-time energies of over 400,000 police officers. These are resources that might otherwise be used to fight violent crime and terrorism. In historical terms, there was every reason to expect that such a policy of prohibition would fail. It is well known, for instance, that the experiment with the prohibition of alcohol in the United States did little more than precipitate a terrible comedy of increased drinking, organized crime, and police corruption. What is not generally remembered is that prohibition was an explicitly religious exercise, being the joint product of the Women's Christian Temperance Union and the pious lobbying of certain Protestant missionary societies. The problem with the prohibition of any desirable commodity is money. The United Nations values the drug trade at $400 billion a year. This exceeds the annual budget for the U.S. Department of Defense. If this figure is correct, the trade in illegal drugs constitutes 8% of all international commerce, while the sale of textiles makes up 7.5%, and motor vehicles just 5.3%. And yet, prohibition itself is what makes the manufacture and sale of drugs so extraordinarily profitable. Those who earn their living in this way enjoy a 5,000 to 20,000% return on their investment, tax-free. Every relevant indicator of the drug trade, rates of drug use and interdiction, estimates of production, the purity of drugs on the street, etc., shows that the government can do nothing to stop it as long as such profits exist. Indeed, these profits are highly corrupting of law enforcement in any case. The crimes of the addict to finance the stratospheric cost of his lifestyle, and the crimes of the dealer to protect both his territory and his goods, are likewise the results of prohibition. A final irony, which seems good enough to be the work of Satan himself, is that the market we have created by our drug laws has become a steady source of revenue for terrorist organizations like Al-Qaeda, Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah, Shining Path, and others. Even if we acknowledge that stopping drug use is a justifiable social goal, how does the financial cost of our war on drugs appear in light of the other challenges we face? Consider that it would require only a one-time expenditure of $2 billion to secure our commercial seaports against smuggled nuclear weapons. At present, we have allocated a mere $93 million for this purpose. How will our prohibition of marijuana use look? This comes at a cost of $4 billion annually. If a new sun ever dawns over the port of Los Angeles. Or consider that the U.S. government can afford to spend only $2.3 billion each year on the reconstruction of Afghanistan. The Taliban and Al-Qaeda are now regrouping. Warlords rule the countryside, beyond the city limits of Kabul. Which is more important to us, reclaiming this part of the world for the forces of civilization, or keeping cancer patients in Berkeley from relieving their nausea with marijuana. Our present use of government funds suggests an uncanny skewing, we might even say derangement, of our national priorities. Such a bizarre allocation of resources is sure to keep Afghanistan in ruins for many years to come. It will also leave Afghan farmers with no alternative but to grow opium. Happily for them, our drug laws still render this a highly profitable enterprise. Anyone who believes that God is watching us from beyond the stars will feel that punishing peaceful men and women for their private pleasure is perfectly reasonable. We are now in the 21st century. Perhaps we should have better reasons for depriving our neighbors of their liberty at gunpoint.